Heading into week 13 of the fantasy football season, here's a few defense DST units I'd look to get on the wire this week. The first one, the Minnesota Vikings. So I know the Vikings haven't been a good unit this season here. They give up tons of points and in a lot of shootouts as well this season. But right here, they're 1 week ahead with a great matchup at the Detroit Lions. So we know we can't move the football, turn over the ball a lot, and they can't score. So right here, the Lions give up the fourth most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So the last few weeks here for the Vikings, week 10 at the Chargers, 20 points allowed, 2 sacks in it though. Week 11 versus Green Bay, 31 points allowed, 2 sacks. And week 12 at the 49ers, 34 points allowed, 2 sacks in it though. And a return touchdown for them on a 98-yard return. So right here, I think they could have a good game at Detroit. It's a 1 week ad, like I mentioned, and they're available right now in 83% of fantasy leagues. The next defense is the Cincinnati Bengals. So this Bengal team, to me, it just seems like their defense shows up only in the big ball games this season here. And they had a big ball game, no doubt about it, with Cincinnati in the Week 12 blowout victory versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. 10 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 windows, a fumble recovery, and a pick 6 in that ball game. But right here, Week 9 versus Cleveland, -2 fantasy points. And week 11 at Vegas, they played pretty decent in that one as well. 13 points allowed, 2 sacks in it though. Week 13, a tough matchup versus the Chargers. But we just saw the Denver Broncos shut down pretty much that Charger offense the best way you can, holding them to 13 points in that ball game, including a pick 6 for Patrick Surtain. So I think Cincinnati in this one could make a few plays. Cincinnati's at home, and just like the Minnesota Vikings, they're available as well in 83% of fantasy leagues. The next defense is the Kansas City Chiefs. So over the last month of the season, this defense is getting stronger. They're making plays, and I think the trade for Melvin Ingram was a big one as well at the NFL trade deadline. So the last few weeks here for the Chiefs, week 9 versus Green Bay, 7 points allowed, a sack and interception, fumble recovery, a block kick in that one. Week 10 at the Vegas Raiders, 14 points allowed, 2 sacks and fumble recovery. And week 11 versus the Cowboys to shut that offense down big time. 9 points allowed, 5 sacks, 2 windows, and a fumble recovery. So right here, coming off the bye, week 13 versus the Denver Broncos, which their offense really isn't all that great in my opinion. Teddy Bridgewater has been hit or miss this season, and I think the Chiefs could get pressure on him. And I definitely could see the Chiefs as well getting a few turnovers caused in this ball game. So right here, that's a Sunday night football game in week 13. And I think the Chiefs once again show up on prime time and play good defense, and they're available in 74% of fantasy leagues. The next defense is the Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins defense, the last few weeks here, 3 out of 4 weeks, they played good fantasy football defense. Week 9 versus Houston, 9 points allowed, 5 sacks, 3 intos, a fumble recovery. Week 10 versus Baltimore, 10 points allowed, 4 sacks, an into, fumble recovery, a touchdown. Week 11 at the Jets, 17 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then week 12 versus the Panthers, they beat up Cam Newton in this Panther offense, where Newton got benched in the third quarter of that ball game. 10 points allowed, 5 sacks, 3 intos, a touchdown on a block kick. So right here, they're playing great defense. And they got to get another good matchup here in week 13 versus the New York Giants that don't really score the football much and have given up the 10th most fan points to defenses on the season. So I mentioned them as a drop last week, and that definitely was a mistake. But they did get dropped in 20% of fantasy leagues coming into this ball game. But they exposed Cam Newton and the Panthers, and I think they could have another good one versus the Giants in week 13. And the 5th and final defense I look to get on the wire this week is the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles, I know they lost that ball game, which they were favored in to beat the New York Giants. But their defense still showed up and played a decent game. Only 13 points allowed and a sack in that one. And their defense was on a decent roll up until here. Week 10 at Denver, 13 points allowed, a sack, fumble recovery, touchdown, and a block kick. Week 11 versus the Saints, 29 points allowed, 2 windows, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown. But right here in week 13, they got a great matchup at the New York Jets. They got a bad taste in their mouth. And right here, they don't got to travel. They got back-to-back games here at MetLife Stadium after they lost in week 12 at the Giants. Right here, they're staying there, and they're going to take it all out on the New York Jets, in my opinion. And Zach Wilson, he didn't look good in this ball game versus the Houston Texans. He got sacked a few times, threw an interception. And I think the Eagles come out in this ball game, and they're looking for big hits and big plays, and they're going to make them on Wilson and the Jets. And the Jets give up the second most to defenses. So right here, I think the Eagles are a big ad this week on the wire, and they're available is Philadelphia. 41% of fantasy leagues, but I think some owners might actually drop them for the waiver wire period after the mediocre performance, but I definitely will. So right here, that's a few defenses I'd look to get on the waiver wire for week 13 of the fantasy football season.